Good evening, everybody. This is Mr. Abdul Wahab Jamal. Today we are going to deal with a new session, English Lower Secondary, Cambridge. And this is 2.6, Comparing Texts, Unit 2, the lesson number 6. The idea is to compare two types of texts which have the same theme, okay, or the same central message. So in this lesson, our learning objectives, learning intuitions, or intentions are to compare and comment on texts have similar themes, to explore the conventions of folk tales, to make a reasoned choice about which stories to read. And let's start with getting started. What are differences between the way information is presented in poems and in stories? Make a list of these differences. As I told you before, today we have two texts. The first one is poetry, while the other one is narrative or story. And in order to compare between two types of texts, one of them is poem, the other is a story, we have to compare the structure, the details, language style, purpose, and to give an example between both. Poems, they are derived from poetry. Usually they are short and they are organized in a stanza. A stanza is a paragraph in poem. While stories are longer, usually they are longer, and they are written in paragraph shape. Okay? Now, number two, the details. The poem focuses on emotions, feelings, theme the author or the poet want to convey. Stories, however, include details, plots, characters, settings, and of course in the plot you have the climax and the resolution. So elements of the story, if you wish to say. Language, we have rhyme in poems, we have rhythm, we have metaphors, we have similes, we have personifications, we have imagery. While stories, typically they are straightforward and they can be written in indirect way. However, they will focus on events and in some writing techniques like foreshadow, like flashback, like suspense, like tension, and so on. The purpose of writing poems is to express emotions, feelings, thoughts, and themes, as I said. While stories usually they follow the structured plot, as I said, with beginning, middle, and end. Okay? It's to tell a story or to tell an event. Here, it's to express an idea or to show emotions or feeling. Example from the text we have Jessie Emily Schofield. It is a free verse. While the story, example of the story today, we are going to examine the folk tales story. One from Africa, the other from China, and the third is from India. Tell me about the poem. Okay? Let's read it with each other and then we will talk about it. Okay? The poem Jessie Emily Schofield by Judy Williams explores similar theme to grandmother song. So we are talking about familial bonds. We are talking about the granddaughters. We are talking about the power of touch and the feelings or the, let's say, traditions or culture which is moving from generation to another generation. Both texts, as I said, are about relationship between the grandmother and the granddaughter, and both include ideas about a human touch and memory. In the poem, the narrator describes washing her grandmother's hair. Let's read the poem and then we will discuss or talk about it.
I used to wash my grandmother's hair when she was old and small, and walked with a frame like a learning child. She would turn off her hearing aid and bend into the water, holding the edge of the sink with long fingers. I would pour warm cupfuls over her skull and wonder what it could be like in her deaf head with 80 years of life. Hers was the softest hair I ever felt, wedding dress silk on a widow. But there is a photo of her sitting swathed in hair that I imagine chestnut from the black and white, long enough to sit on. Her wet head felt delicate as a bird skull, worn thin by waves of age, as she stood bent, my mother's mother under my hands.
My mother's mother, okay? That's another way to say my grandmother. Let me please analyze the text, okay? The poem is a personal reflection by the speaker on their relationship with their grandmother, as well as a meditation on again or aging, memory, and the passage of time. The poem reflects several important features and conventions, like the poem is using first person perspective, okay? So the speaker will reflect on their personal experiences, and the speaker is likely a grandchild recalling memories of caring for their grandmother. We have lots of imagery and descriptive language. The poem uses vivid imagery to describe the grandmother's physical state, like softest hair I've ever felt, and delicate as bird's skull, which convey both tenderness and fragility. The detailed imagery helps the reader to picture the screen or the scene and feel the emotions of the speaker. Remember that imagery, okay, imagery, it is to paint a vivid picture about something in the reader mind using one or all of the five senses. So what you can see, what you can feel, what you can hear, what you can touch, and what you can smell. That's imagery. When they said softness, this is related to touch. I've felt. And delicate as bird skull. This is another touch. Okay? We have metaphors and similes because the poem uses metaphor and similes to convey meaning and to compare two things, sometimes with as or like and other times without as or like. An example is the grandmother's hair, which is comparing to wedding dress silk. That evoke both beauty and nostalgia. Okay, she is beautiful and she has nostalgia for the past when she was young. The comparison of the grandfather's wet or grandmother's wet head to a bird skull suggests fragility and aging. Okay, bird's skull is so soft, and so the grandmother's skull or head, it is so soft and fragile. I'm comparing, I'm using metaphor and simile. Symbolism, it is to attach something to an idea. So, for example, you are attaching red to blood. You are attaching white to peace. You are attaching green to uh, prosperity, for example, and building, and so on. So the grandmother's deaf head, that's a symbol. And her hearing aid may symbolize both the loss of the ability to hear and the challenge of aging. So despite the fact that she is aging and she can't hear, but she is challenging and she is trying to use, for example, hearing aid piece in order to listen, to hear, instead of staying deaf. The speaker reflects on what a grandmother's life and mind might be like, adding depth to the theme of again of aging. Time and memory, because the poem reflects on the passage of the time, with the grandmothers being described both elderly and fragile. The speaker remembers some time when the grandmothers used to be youth, and she used to be young, and she used to have hair, okay, and contrast it with the elderly women in front of them. There's also a shift between past and present moments in the speaker memories in order to kill boredom or to make the reader compare between before and after. Now, the last thing is contrast and juxtaposition. The poem contrasts the past to present, as we said, with an image of the grandmother in the photograph being compared to the elderly woman the speaker is caring for. This technique shows the effect of time and aging again. So all the poem is trying to show difference or contrast between what was before and what is now. If we ask about the powerful words, powerful phrases found inside the poem, I can extract some. Deaf heard. It is a metaphor for the grandmother's inability to hear. Synonym is silent. Antonym, auditory or can hearing. And the effect is symbolizes the loss of sensory ability and the passage of time. Number two, wedding dress silk. It's a metaphor for the softness of the grandmother's hair. A synonym, fine, smooth, stain. An antonym is rough and coarse. The effect is to evoke a sense of beauty, delicacy, and nostalgia. The word bird skull or bird skull, it's a comparison to suggest fragility and delicacy. The meaning or the synonym is fragile, while the antonym is strong, and the effect is to convey vulnerability and the fragility of age. Swathed, to be wrapped, to be covered completely, and the antonym is to expose or to uncover. And the effect is suggesting comfort, protection, or the overwhelming nature of the memory. Chestnut, it's a color of the hair. Usually it is brown. The same meaning, brown, and the other meaning, blonde or black, the antonym. The effect is to evoke a rich, warm memory of the grandmother's youth. Waves of age suggest a gradual, inevitable message of time or passage of time and aging. The synonym, tides, flow. The antonym, stagnation and stillness. And the effect is to highlight the idea of aging as a slow but inevitable process. And the last word is softest. That's a superlative adjective which describes the texture of the grandmother hair. A synonym is silky or smooth, and antonym is rough. And the effect is to evoke a sense of tenderness and care for the grandmother. What is the text talking about? The poem is about the speaker who remember their grandmother, especially the times when they would wash her hair. The speaker talks about how their grandmother was old, small, and sometimes had trouble in hearing. The speaker would pour warm water over her head and wonder what it would like for their grandmother, who had lived for many years. The grandmother's hair was so soft, and the speaker remembers seeing picture of her when she was younger with long, beautiful hair. He is comparing and contrasting. The poem helps us to think about how people change as they get older and how we can feel both love and sadness when remembering those we care about. Going back to the text, as we said, after we analyze the whole poem, the theme of the poem, touch, the power of touch, details narrator watches grandmother or wash grandmother's delicate hair, showing their bond, the familial bond. Time and change, the grandmother's aging symbolizes the passage of time and change. And the questions to think about: how does washing the grandmother's hair show their bond? How does the poem describes the grandmother's change over time? Can you now compare this text, the poem, to the grandmother's song which we discovered or studied in the poem or in the unit number 2? Grandmother's song, remember, it's a story, it's narrative, while Jessie Emily Schofield is a poem or poetry. Grandmother's song, we have the theme of a granddaughter's age. Young remembers the grandmothers fondly, while in Jessie Emily Schofield, the grandmother is older and reflects on grandmother's change. That's the granddaughter, sorry. Now, if you want to express the love from granddaughter into grandmother, we have sings a song showing closeness, while in the poem, washing the grandmother hair, showing care and reflection. What is the lesson learned? In a grandmother's song, it is importance of memory and love, while in Jessie Emily Schofield, the lesson learned is the passage of time and the fragility of life. If I might ask you, how does each granddaughter feel about her grandmother? The first one, grandmother song. She is proud of her grandmother and she is helping her in the end of the story. In Jessica Emily Schofield, we have a granddaughter who depends on her grandmother. However, she knows that this grandmother is strong enough to live alone, or she was, for example, living or doing everything alone. After now she is old, she needs help. Do they both learn anything from their experiences? Yes, both of them. Both of them learned something from their past, from their ancestors, in order to deal with, to use with the granddaughters later. Comparing description of grandmothers. I have a grandmother in Grandmother's Song and a grandmother in Jessie Emily Schofield. In the first one, Grandmother's Song, we described the grandmother, quotation, her downy cheeks stretched smoothly and the plums across wide cheekbones, gentle and full of life. In Jessie Emily Schofield, her wet head felt delicate as a bird's skull or that worn thin by waves of age, fragile and aged. The tone, it's warm and tender in Grandmother's Song, it's delicate but fragile in Jessie Emily Schofield. Imagery, you can use the words soft, comforting, and a plum. In Jessie Emily Schofield, you will say, her wet head felt delicate as a buskle. She worn thin, she worn thin by the waves of the age. The image is in the grandmother's song, soft, comforting, plump, as we said, and sensitive, aging, and worn thin. I need now to talk about folktale. The word folk, it means people, certain group of people. Folktale conventions, the characteristics of the traditional tale or the group tale. You can say folktale, you can say traditional tale, you can say, for example, fairy tale if you wish to say. You can use words like fables and so on. And I need to say that folktale is related to each nation. So we have Egyptian folktale, we have a Chinese folktale, we have Indian folktale, we have African folktale, you have European folktale, and so on. So according to the group which the main character comes from, you can create a related folktale. The feature of folktales, they are simple storyline. They are easy to follow plot with clear events. They have repeated events, usually events that occur more than once throughout the tale. We have simple language because language is clear and easy to understand. Journey or challenge. Main character faces problems or go in poetry. And then we have good versus evil. Characters are clearly good or bad, and the lesson is teach or taught. Folktales you often teach a moral or life lesson. I have three examples from the text. Princess Kuan Yin, that's a Chinese story. The Orphan Boy and the Mysterious Stone, that's Nigerian story or folktale. And then we have The Old Giving Snake. It's an Indian one. Let's continue. Let's listen, please.
Princess Kuan Yin, a Chinese folktale. A king has three daughters, but his favorite is the youngest one, Kuan Yin. He wants her to be queen when he gives up the throne. Kuan Yin does not want to be queen. She thinks it will make her unhappy. She wants to spend her life studying and helping poor people. As the king is dying, he tells Kuan Yin that he has found a husband for her and she must be married and become queen. The Orphan Boy and the Mysterious Stone, a Nigerian folk tale. When his father and mother die, 10-year-old Kita becomes chief of the tribe. However, his people do not like him, so he runs away. He has no money and becomes very hungry, but has a dream in which his father tells him where to find buried treasure. He does not go because he is frightened. He then meets an old woman who gives him a stone from a lake. She tells him to go and dig up the treasure. The Gold-Giving Snake. An Indian folk tale. At the end of a long day, a poor farmer called Haridata falls asleep under a tree. He wakes up to find a giant snake coming out of its den. He decides to give it a bowl of milk, hoping that it will bring him good luck. The next day, he finds a gold coin in the bowl. Every time he gives the snake milk, it leaves him a gold coin. One day, Haridata asks his son to feed the snake. His son decides to kill the snake and steal the gold from its den.
Okay, and these were three examples of opening or beginning, okay, a traditional tale story. And these ellipses, it means to be continued or interrupted the ideas, and you will complete, you will write the ending. Now, in order to choose which folk tale to read, you have to consider when choosing a folk tale those ideas. Now, questions ask yourself. Interest. Do you enjoy stories with magic, manuals, or adventures? Number two, setting. Which setting, culture, location do you find exciting of mysteries? And number three, lesson. What type of moral lesson would you like to explore? I would go for the gold-giving snake because I love magical creatures and the idea of receiving a gift from a snake sounds fascinating. And when I have my own flesh and blood, my son, he wanted to kill and steal the money, that's a first. I have to know why. I need to read more. Now, in order to write a folktale, you have to use 4 steps, okay? Number one step, or step number one, 5 steps. Step number one, you have to build your story on a theme or a central message for sure. Before start writing, you have to choose a theme, to pick a theme like kindness, bravery, greed, etc. And then you have to build your story on this. So my story is talking about peace. So everything is related to peace in those 4 or 5 sections, or 4 or 5 things. Number two, you have to create the main character. Develop a character who will face a problem or a challenge, and this character will be developed later when you will add a challenge, because the character must face and overcome an obstacle he is using. Number four, we are using simple language in order to keep the sentence short and clear, using accessible language, and will not waste the time of the students searching or looking up for a word. So use smile or simple language. And the last one, include a moral. You have to end your story with a moral. Sample writing task answer. Let me talk about the text and then we will move on. Explanation of features and conventions of the folktale. These 3 stories are folktales, which are traditional stories passed down through presentation or generation. Folktales often have the same features. We have moral lesson, moral lesson. Folktales usually have a clear moral lesson. For example, in the gold giving snake, the son learns that greed can lead to bad consequences. Number two, supernatural elements. Many folktales include magical or supernatural elements. For instance, the orphan boy and the mysterious stones involves a dream and mysterious stone. So while the gold giving snake has magical snake that gives gold coins. Number five or four, we have relatable characters. We have supernatural elements. We have conflict and resolution. It's like any story. You have the elements of the story. Folktales features ordinary characters like king, poor farmers, children who face extraordinary challenge. And because they have conflicts or they are good and they are fighting bad people, so usually often a central conflict that drives the story. The resolution, folktales typically end with a resolution or a lesson learned in these stories. The character actions and choices lead to positive or negative outcome. Now, some new words found in the text. You have favorite, the person or thing that is most liked. It has the meaning of a preferred, and it has the antonym of least liked or disliked. And that will show the close relationship between the king and the queen. Unhappy, feeling sad or displeased. A synonym is sad, sorrowful. An antonym is happy and joyful. That highlights the princess. And then we have the treasure, which means valuable object or collection of valuable objects. The same meaning, riches, wealth, while the antonym is poverty and loss. And it will symbolize a great and reward or something worth seeking. Frightened, it's to feel fearful or anxiety. Afraid, scared, terrified. It has the same meaning. While the antonym is brave, confident. And the effect is to indicate a young kite or cheetah's fear and hesitation. Greed, selfish desire for more than one needs or deserve. Selfishness has the meaning and generosity has the antonym. And that represents the negative trait that leads to harm in the good giving snake. Luck, it is the success or fortune brought by chance. It has the meaning of fortune and an antonym like bad luck or misfortune. The effect is to show Haridata's hope that the snake will bring good fortune. The word milk, of course, it is the liquid produced by cows often associated with nourishment. Same meaning is the cream, liquid, dairy, and we don't have an antonym. And that will symbolize the offering made by Haridata to love the snake. The stories now, all of them, are all folktale. They are folktale from different culture. As I said, one Chinese, one African, and one Indian. Folk tales are stories passed down through many generations, often with lesson or morals. The first folk tale, Princess Kuan Yin. In this story, the king wants her youngest daughter, Kuan Yin, to become queen, but she doesn't want to become. She thinks it will make her happy or unhappy. Sorry. So she wants to help people instead. And the story touches about following what makes us unhappy or happy to do something with feelings effects. Number two, the orphan boy and the mysterious stone. That's about a boy, a young Kita, who becomes a leader when his parents die. But the people don't like him, so he runs away. He has a dream where this father or his father tells him about the treasure, but he's too scared to get it, so he meets a woman who gives him a stone, telling him to find the treasure. The story shows, of course, the importance of courage and listening to advice. The gold-giving snake, a poor farmer named Haridata feeds a snake, and in return, he is rewarded with gold coins. But when his son tries to threat or to steal the gold by killing the snake, everything goes wrong. You couldn't kill the messenger. Learn this. Everything goes wrong. This story teaches us about the dangers of a greedy and how greed can be. Writing. I'll do it in the end. The brave farmer and the golden apple. I have a sample writing. It's the same here. Write a short folk tale about a magical animal or a creature that teaches lesson. Use the following steps. Choose your magical creatures first. Think about what type of a creature or animal would be in your story. Snake, bird, dragon, etc. Number two, create a problem or a conflict. Because remember, the problem, and descriptive language or writing a good moral could give you an excellent traditional tale. What does the creature do, and how does it help to challenge or to help challenging the main character? Include a moral. What lesson does the story teach? For example, does it show importance or kindness, honesty or bravery? And in the end, remember to use descriptive language to make your character or creature, sorry, interesting by designing them clearly words. After you finish editing, you revising, you have to write. Make sure your story has a clear ending and don't forget include the moral lesson the character learns. I have an example. Once upon a time in a small village, once there was a poor farmer named Rani who lived in a small village. One day, he walking through the forest and okay, so she found a glowing apple on the ground. It was golden and shining brightly. And an old woman appeared to be. So a woman, as I said, an old woman appeared and told Rani, this apple will give you great wealth, but you must not let anyone know about it. So Rani decides to take the apple home. Rani decided to take the apple home. As days passed, she noticed that every similar time or every time she ate a bite. However, okay, so however, a greedy merchant from the village found out about the apple and wanted it for himself. So the merchant stole the apple and ate it all. Instead of becoming wealthy, he fell ill and his crops withered away. The villagers soon learned that greedy or greed and caused is the most important thing. Rani, having learned that value of kindness, sharing valuable or sharing her food with the poor and helped others is better, her village flourished and she become known. If you want to put a checklist for the writing folktale, you have to say, do I have a story structure? Is it clear beginning, middle, and end? And then the characters. Did I include good versus bad? The challenge or the journey. Did I ensure a character who faces challenge or journey? The lesson or the moral. The story should teach a lesson or give a moral. And the language style, of course, you are using simple, clear language and include figurative language as I told you before. In any story or folktale, you have to put a topic, you have to put moral, you have to put characters, you have to put plot, language, and the grammar and the spelling. It's very important. For your homework, you will go to 2.6 comparing texts. You have now number one, focus. You will draw a line between the genre of the story as well as the convention of it. Number two, you have the beginning, Princess Kuan Yin, a Chinese folktale, and you have continuation for it. So you have this, and you will apply, yeah, you have to read the descriptions of the two folk tales, and you have to read or to write down what features they have in common. Like, for example, the characters and the plot. And the challenge is the last one. You have the gold given snake, an Indian folk tale. You have the start or the opening of this tale in your notebook. You have to write the ending of it. Remember that folk tales end with a lesson about life, so write about or around 100 words. You will simply continue the story, but don't make it so much long. So I'd like to thank you so much for having me today. Next session, inshallah, we will start with unit number 3, 3.1, The Mystery of Oak Island. And see you next time with a new genre and a new text. That was Mr. Abdulhab Jamal saluting all of you, and see you tonight. See you tomorrow. Thank you so much for having me tonight, and have a nice night. Bye bye.